I, 32, F, was supposed to be in Chicago for 3 more days. The conference had ended early, a surprise blessing, and my flight was rescheduled. I didn't tell my husband, Mark, 34M. I wanted to see the look on his face when I walked through the door. We had been married for 6 years, and these little surprises were the sparks that kept our life bright. The business trips were grueling, a necessary evil for the promotion I was chasing, the one we both agreed would set us up for the future we dreamed of. Buying a bigger house, maybe starting a family. He had always been my biggest supporter, or so I believed. He'd pack my suitcase with little notes tucked into the pockets and call me every night before bed. This trip was no different. He had told me how much he missed me just last night, his voice thick with what I thought was affection. The taxi dropped me at the end of our quiet suburban street. I wanted to savor the walk home, the familiar sight of the oak trees lining the sidewalk and the cozy glow of our neighbor's porch lights. It was just after 9 in the evening, a calm Tuesday. As I rounded the final corner, my heart sank. Our driveway, which should have been empty except for my car sitting cold in the garage, was packed. There was a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize, a bulky SUV that belonged to Mark's mother, Eleanor, and a sporty little convertible that was his sister Chloe's pride and joy. My first thought was that something was wrong. An emergency. My steps quickened, my suitcase bumping awkwardly against my legs. But as I got closer, I heard it. Laughter. Loud, celebratory laughter spilling out from the back of the house. There was no emergency. It was a party Mark hadn't told me about. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. He knew I was exhausted after these trips. He usually kept the house quiet for a day or two after I got back, letting me recover. Why would he throw a party when he thought I was still 3 states away? And why with his family? Eleanor and Chloe were not my biggest fans. They tolerated me, but their smiles were always a little too tight, their compliments laced with a subtle barb I could never quite put my finger on. Mark always said I was imagining it. They just love me a lot, he would explain. They're protective. Give them time. I had given them 6 years. I stopped at the edge of our lawn, hidden by the shadows of our neighbor's overgrown hedge. I didn't want to walk in just yet. Something felt deeply wrong. This wasn't a simple get-together. The air was thick with a kind of triumphant energy that made my skin crawl. I set my suitcase down gently on the grass and crept along the side of the house, my sensible work heels sinking into the soft earth. The curtains in the living room were drawn, but a sliver of light escaped from the dining room window at the back. I peered through the gap. The scene inside was brightly lit and animated. Mark was standing at the head of the table, his face flushed with excitement. Eleanor was beside him, a proud, possessive hand on his arm. Chloe was raising a champagne flute, her expression smug. There were a few other people there, cousins of Mark's, I thought, people I had met only briefly at holidays. A large banner was strung across the wall behind them. From my angle, I could only make out a few letters, but they looked like congratulations for what? Mark hadn't gotten a promotion. I would have been the first person he told. I moved closer, pressing my ear near the gap, where the window was slightly ajar to let in the cool night air. The voices became clearer. Chloe was in the middle of a toast. To Mark, she said, her voice high and giddy. To his new beginning. To finally getting everything he deserves, without any distractions. Distractions? Was I a distraction? The others cheered and drank. My heart started to pound a painful, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Eleanor spoke next, her voice cutting through the chatter. I'm just so proud of you, son, she said, patting his cheek. You were strong. You did what you had to do. Now we can finally get this house back to the way it should be. The first thing to go will be that dreadful gray paint in the study. It's so joyless. We'll pick a nice, warm color for your new office, my study. She was talking about my study, the room I had spent months designing, my sanctuary where I worked from home, the place where I was building the very future they were supposedly celebrating. Mark laughed. It wasn't his usual warm, easy laugh. This one was sharp, almost cruel. Mom, let's get the ink dry first, he said. But you're right. That room needs a complete overhaul. No more spreadsheets and conference calls. Maybe I'll turn it into a den. A proper man's den. He looked around at the small crowd, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. I have to admit, he continued, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial tone, her getting that promotion was the best thing that could have happened. This trip was the perfect cover. It gave us all the time we needed to get everything in order, without her hovering around, asking questions. The world tilted on its axis. My breath caught in my throat. Her.
He was talking about me.
My promotion. My business trip. A cover for what? What had they gotten in order? The pieces started to click into place with horrifying speed. The secret party. The talk of a new beginning, redecorating my office. The banner. It wasn't for a job. It was for him. It was a celebration of my absence and a future that didn't include me. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I stumbled back from the window, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a gasp. I couldn't breathe. The air was too thick, too heavy with their betrayal. I grabbed my suitcase and fled, running blindly back down the street, my footsteps silent on the grass. I didn't stop until I was several blocks away, my lungs burning, hot tears streaming down my face. I collapsed onto a park bench under the dim glow of a streetlight, the laughter from my home still ringing in my ears. My husband, my partner, the man I loved, was celebrating the end of our marriage while I was miles away working for our future. And his family, the people who were supposed to be my family too, were cheering him on. The surprise was on me, after all.
And it was devastating.
I sat there for what felt like hours, a cold dread seeping into my bones, replacing the initial shock and pain. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and hurt. How could this be happening? We had just been talking about our 5-year plan last month. He had held my hand, looked me in the eyes, and told me he couldn't imagine his life without me. Was all of it a lie? Every "I love you," every shared dream, every promise for the future? The thought was a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me all over again. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Mark. A text message lit up the screen. Thinking of you. Hope the conference is going well. Can't wait for you to be home. Love you. The hypocrisy was so staggering it was almost absurd. He had sent that while standing in our dining room, surrounded by people toasting to his freedom from me. I stared at the message, the words blurring through my tears. Love you. The lie was so casual, so effortless. It made me wonder how many other lies there had been. I couldn't go back to the house. I couldn't face them. Not like this. I needed a plan. My mind, usually so sharp and analytical at work, felt foggy and slow. I forced myself to think. What do I do now? I couldn't just walk in and confront them. They would deny everything, twist my words, and paint me as the hysterical, paranoid wife.
Mark was an expert at that.
He'd done it before in smaller arguments, making me feel like I was overreacting or misinterpreting things. You're too sensitive, he'd say, his voice calm and reasonable, while my own emotions felt chaotic and wrong. No, a direct confrontation now would be a disaster. I would be outnumbered and emotionally compromised. They were celebrating a victory. I couldn't walk in as the defeated party. I needed proof. I needed to understand the full scope of what they were doing. The words I'd overheard were damning, but they were just words. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. The phrase, "get the ink dry," echoed in my head. It sounded legal. It sounded final. My blood ran cold again as the implication settled in. Divorce. He was planning to divorce me. He had already started the process. The party wasn't just a celebration of the idea. It was a celebration of an action already taken. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, a new feeling beginning to solidify beneath the grief, a cold, hard anger. They had underestimated me. They saw me as a distraction, a work-obsessed woman who was too busy and too trusting to see what was happening right under her nose. They thought I would come home, exhausted and unsuspecting, and walk right into the trap they had set for me. They were counting on my shock and emotional turmoil to give them the upper hand. They were wrong. I stood up, my legs shaky, but my resolve firming. I pulled my phone out again, my fingers moving quickly. I opened a hotel booking app and found a room at a generic business hotel near the airport, a place no one would ever think to look for me. I used my personal credit card, not our joint one. I needed a safe place to think, a place where I could be anonymous and invisible for the next few days. I hailed another taxi and gave the driver the address. As the car pulled away from the curb, I took one last look in the direction of my house. The lights were still blazing, the sound of their laughter a faint, mocking echo in the night. It was the last time I would ever see it as my home. From now on, it was just a house I had to fight for. The hotel room was sterile and impersonal, all beige walls and generic art.
It was perfect.
There were no memories here, no ghosts of a shared life to haunt me. I dropped my suitcase by the door and sank onto the edge of the bed. The adrenaline that had propelled me this far began to fade, leaving a profound, hollow emptiness in its wake. I let myself cry then, not the frantic, shocked tears from before, but a deep, mournful sob for the life I thought I had, for the man I thought I knew, for the future that had been stolen from me. After a while, the tears subsided, replaced by a grim determination. Crying wouldn't help me. Feeling sorry for myself wouldn't help me. I needed to act. I took a long, hot shower, letting the water wash away the grime of the flight and, I hoped, some of the emotional turmoil. I put on the clean pajamas I had packed from my hotel in Chicago and sat down at the small desk with my laptop. It was time to find out exactly what my husband had been doing while I was away. I started with our finances. We had a joint savings account, a joint checking account, and several joint credit cards. I had always handled the majority of our financial planning. Mark had claimed he found it boring and was happy to let me manage it. "You're so much better at it than I am," he'd say with a charming smile. Now I saw that for what it was, a way for him to feign ignorance, to let me do the work while he plotted how to take it all. I logged into our main bank account. The balance was lower than it should have been. Much lower. My eyes scanned the recent transactions. I saw the usual mortgage payment, the utility bills, a few credit card payments. And then I saw it. A single, massive withdrawal. $150,000. Transferred out of our joint savings account 2 days ago, the day after I had left for my trip. The description was vague. Investment transfer. I had made no such transfer. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was part of their plan. He was draining our accounts. I frantically searched for where the money had gone. The transfer was to an account at a different bank, an account I had no access to, an account I didn't even know existed. An account I was willing to bet that was solely in his name. He was hiding marital assets. He was stealing from me, from us. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. He had taken the money I had worked so hard for, the money for my bonuses, the extra income from the very projects that required these business trips, and he had siphoned it away for himself. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to continue. I opened our shared email account. We used it for household bills and official correspondence. I rarely checked it, as most important things came to my personal work email. I typed Mark's name into the search bar. A list of emails appeared. My eyes immediately snagged on a subject line from a week ago. "Your consultation." It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. My finger trembled as I clicked on it. The email was a confirmation of an appointment Mark had with a divorce attorney named David Chen. The appointment had been the day before I left for Chicago. He had met with a divorce lawyer and hadn't said a word. He had kissed me goodbye at the airport, telling me to be safe, knowing he was about to dismantle our entire life. The betrayal was so deep, so calculated. It felt like a physical wound. I scrolled down. There were more emails. A chain between Mark and Mr. Chen. I opened the most recent one. It was a copy of a petition for dissolution of marriage, filed in the county court yesterday. My name was at the top, listed as the respondent. He had already filed. He had filed for divorce while I was on a plane, thinking I was flying home to my loving husband. The petition was full of legal jargon, but the message was clear. He was demanding the house, spousal support, and an equitable distribution of our assets. The petition also included a list of our joint assets, a list that was conspicuously missing the $150,000 he had just transferred. My anger burned white-hot. This wasn't just a man falling out of love. This was a premeditated attack, a meticulously planned campaign to leave me with nothing. But the anger gave me clarity. He had made mistakes. Big ones. Moving that money was a foolish, greedy error. Filing for divorce and then immediately hiding a huge sum of money was something no competent lawyer would advise. It was a gift. It was the proof I needed. I started taking screenshots, saving every email, every transaction record. I created a new, secure folder on my cloud drive and uploaded everything. I worked methodically, my mind now in the familiar, comforting zone of problem solving. I was no longer the grieving wife. I was a woman gathering evidence, building a case. Then I found the email chain that broke me all over again. It was between Mark, Eleanor, and Chloe. The subject line was the plan it had started over a month ago. I read through the messages, my stomach churning with each word. They discussed me in the most callous, dismissive terms. Eleanor called me an absentee wife and a social climber who was using her son to get ahead. Chloe mocked my clothes, my friends, my career. They dissected my personality, my habits, my perceived flaws, all while plotting how to get rid of me. They had a script. Mark was to play the victim, the long-suffering husband neglected by his ambitious, cold-hearted wife. The business trip was the final straw that had broken his heart. They had coached him on what to say to the lawyer, what to claim in the petition. Eleanor had even written out talking points for him. Tell him you feel abandoned. One of her emails read, emphasize your emotional distress. We need the judge to see you as the wronged party. It's the only way you'll get the house. The cruelty was breathtaking. They weren't just ending a marriage. They were trying to rewrite its history, to paint me as the villain in a story where they were the heroes. And Mark, my Mark, had gone along with it. He had absorbed their poison, let it twist him into this cruel, conniving stranger. In his replies, he was enthusiastic, thanking them for their support, promising them he would be strong. And see it through, he talked about his future, a future of leisure and comfort, funded by my hard work. Once we have our bonus money, I can finally quit my job and focus on my hobbies, he wrote in one email. I felt sick. My bonus. I had just received a significant annual bonus, the one I had been so proud of, the one that had gone directly into our joint savings account. That was the money he had taken. The $150,000. It was my bonus. He had waited for it to be deposited, and then he had stolen it. I closed the laptop, unable to read any more. The scope of their betrayal was far greater than I could have imagined. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was a conspiracy, a carefully orchestrated plan to defraud me. And they were so sure of themselves, so smugly confident in their success, that they had put it all in writing. They had documented their own crime. The fools. The arrogant, greedy fools. A new kind of calm settled over me. The pain was still there, a dull, heavy ache in my chest, but it was now overlaid with a layer of icy resolve. They thought I was weak. They thought I would crumble. They thought wrong. They had started a war. I was going to finish it. My first call was to my best friend, Sarah. She was a corporate lawyer, sharp, pragmatic, and fiercely loyal. I knew she would be asleep, but this couldn't wait. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. Hello. Sarah, it's me, I said, my own voice sounding strange and distant to my ears. Hey, what's wrong? You sound awful. Is everything okay in Chicago? I'm not in Chicago, I said, and then the whole story came pouring out. I told her everything. Coming home early, the party, the voices through the window, the hotel room, the bank account, the emails. I spoke in a flat, emotionless tone, recounting the facts as if I were delivering a presentation at work. It was the only way I could get through it without breaking down again. There was a long silence on the other end of the line when I finished. Then, Sarah's voice, no longer sleepy, but sharp and furious. That absolute bastard, she hissed. That conniving, spineless, thieving bastard. And his mother and sister? I never liked them. I knew they were snakes. What do I do, Sarah? I asked, my voice finally cracking. Okay, first thing, she said, her lawyer mode kicking in. You stay right where you are. Do not go to the house. Do not contact him. Do not let him know you know anything. You're still in Chicago until Thursday. Understand? Yes, I whispered. Second, you've done brilliantly by getting all that evidence.
Send it to me.
All of it.
Now.
I'm going to look it over. Third, and this is the most important part, you're going to get a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. A killer. I know a few. There's one in particular, a woman named Jessica Davis. She eats people like Mark for breakfast. I'm going to call her first thing in the morning and get you an appointment. She's the best divorce attorney in the city, specializing in high-conflict cases with hidden assets. This is her bread and butter. Okay, I said, a flicker of hope igniting within me. I wasn't alone in this anymore. We are going to burn them to the ground, Sarah said, her voice a low, dangerous promise. They think they're smart. We're smarter. They think they can take you down. They have no idea who they're messing with. Now get some sleep. You're going to need your strength. After I hung up, I forwarded all the files to Sarah. Seeing them all listed out, the bank statements, the legal filing, the hateful emails, it felt like an arsenal. It was ugly and painful, but it was also powerful. It was the truth. I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept replaying conversations with Mark from the past few months, searching for signs I had missed. The way he'd suddenly become so interested in the exact date my bonus would be paid. His uncharacteristic encouragement for me to go on this specific trip. It's a great opportunity, he had said. You have to go, the little comments from Eleanor about how tired I looked, how I was working too hard, how a man needs his wife at home. At the time, I had dismissed them as nagging. Now I saw them for what they were. Part of the narrative they were building, laying the groundwork for their story of the neglected husband. The manipulation was so insidious, so deeply woven into the fabric of our lives, that I had never seen it. I had been living in a house of cards, and I never even felt the wobble. The next morning, I woke up feeling surprisingly clear-headed. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in my gut, but the anger had sharpened into a fine point. Sarah called at 8 a.m. sharp. I've read everything, she said, her voice grim. It's even worse than you described. The premeditation is shocking. But the good news is they're sloppy. Incredibly sloppy. Putting all of that in an email? Moving the money like that? They've handed us a loaded gun. I spoke to Jessica Davis. She can see this afternoon at 2-inch. Thank you, Sarah, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I don't know what I would do without you. That's what friends are for, she replied. Now go get some breakfast. You need to eat. Today, we start fighting back. I spent the morning preparing for the meeting. I organized the evidence into a clear timeline. I wrote down a list of every asset I could think of, both joint and personal. I even accessed our home security system remotely. The cameras covered the front door and the back patio. I scrolled back through the footage from the day I left. And there it was. Just a few hours after I had gone to the airport, Eleanor's SUV pulled into the driveway. She and Chloe got out, and Mark let them in. An hour later, they came out carrying boxes. My boxes. I zoomed in. I could see the corner of my framed university diploma, the edge of a photo album my grandmother had given me. They were packing up my life, erasing me from the home I had paid for, while I was sitting in an airport lounge waiting for my flight. They had put the boxes in the garage, out of sight. They were literally hiding my existence. I saved the footage. It was more proof of their calculated cruelty. Meeting Jessica Davis was like meeting a force of nature. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, an impeccably tailored suit, and an aura of unshakable confidence. I sat in her plush office, overlooking the city skyline, and told her my story for the second time. I didn't cry. I presented the facts calmly, walking her through the evidence I had collected. She listened intently, nodding occasionally, her expression unreadable. When I finished, She leaned back in her chair and looked at me. "Well," she said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Your husband and his family are both greedy and stupid. That is a potent combination, and a very advantageous one for us." She pulled a legal pad towards her. "The transfer of the $150,000 is a clear case of dissipation of marital assets. It's blatant. We can file an emergency motion to have those funds frozen immediately. The fact that it was your bonus, which they specifically planned to take, makes it even more egregious. The emails are a goldmine. They establish intent to defraud. This isn't just a divorce. This is a deliberate, orchestrated attempt to leave you destitute. What do we do?" I asked, feeling a surge of confidence from her assessment. "We play their game, but we play it better," she said, her eyes glinting. "You're scheduled to come home tomorrow, correct? You will do just that. You will walk into that house as if you know nothing. You will be tired from your trip. You will be happy to be home. You will give him no reason to suspect that you are aware of his little plan." "I don't know if I can do that," I said honestly. "I don't know if I can look at him and not scream." "You can," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "You are a successful, intelligent woman. You can act. Think of it as the most important business negotiation of your life. Your opponent thinks he has all the leverage. He doesn't know you're holding all the cards. You will let him play his hand. Let him think he's in control. And then, when the moment is right, we will utterly dismantle him." Her confidence was infectious. For the first time in 2 days, I felt a sense of power. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist. "Here's what's going to happen," Jessica continued, laying out the plan. "My office will file our own divorce petition first thing in the morning. We will beat him to the punch. Our petition will include the emergency motion to freeze all assets, joint and personal, including the secret account he opened. We will request a forensic accountant to go through every penny they have all touched for the last year. We will subpoena the records of his mother's financial advisor friend. We will also file for exclusive use and possession of the marital home, given his fraudulent behavior." "He'll be served," she said with a grim satisfaction. "But not yet. The timing has to be perfect. We want to catch him and his mother and sister completely off guard." We spent the next hour mapping out the strategy. The key was my performance. I had to be the loving, unsuspecting wife for just a little while longer. Jessica suggested I orchestrate a situation where they would all be together so the fallout would be contained and witnessed by the key players. "He thinks he's going to serve you papers and watch you fall apart," Jessica said as I was leaving. "We're going to serve him the consequences of his actions and watch him realize he has lost everything. It will be much more satisfying." I walked out of her office feeling like a different person. The fear and hurt were still there, but they were now fuel for a cold, controlled fire. I spent the rest of the day in my hotel room, preparing. I practiced my smile in the mirror. I rehearsed a story about a boring conference and flight delays. I even bought a small, thoughtful gift for Mark at the hotel gift shop, a book by his favorite author. The duplicity felt strange and empowering. I was weaving my own web now. The next day, Thursday, was the day I was originally scheduled to return. I checked out of the hotel, took a taxi to the airport, and then took another taxi from the airport to my house, just as I normally would. As we turned onto my street, I saw Mark's car in the driveway. My heart began to pound, a familiar mix of anxiety and anger. I took a deep breath. Showtime. I paid the driver and pulled my suitcase up the walkway. I put my key in the lock, the metal feeling cold and foreign in my hand. I pushed the door open and called out, my voice bright and cheerful, a perfect imitation of my old self. "Honey, I'm home." Mark came out of the kitchen, a surprised look on his face that quickly morphed into a wide, fake smile.
"Hey,
"You're back." I was just about to start dinner. He came over and gave me a hug. His arms felt strange around me, the embrace of a stranger. I had to fight every instinct to recoil. I hugged him back, resting my head on his shoulder for a moment, the picture of a happy, weary traveler. "I'm so glad to be home," I said, pulling away and giving him a tired smile.
The trip was exhausting.
How was your week? Oh, quiet, he said, his eyes shifting away from mine for a fraction of a second. Just worked, missed you. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. He was a better actor than I had given him credit for. I brought you something, I said, handing him the small bag from the gift shop. He opened it, his smile faltering for a moment when he saw the book.
Oh, wow, thanks.
You didn't have to do that. He looked genuinely uncomfortable, probably because my thoughtful gesture didn't fit into the narrative of the neglectful wife he had created. Good. Let him be uncomfortable. The evening was a masterclass in deception. I asked him about his work. I told him anecdotes from the conference. I unpacked my suitcase, putting my clothes away in the closet we shared. Every normal, domestic act felt surreal. I was a ghost in my own life, moving through the motions of a marriage that was already dead. He was attentive, almost overly so, asking if I needed anything, telling me to relax. He was playing his part too, the caring husband, right up until the end. I could feel the tension humming beneath his placid surface. He was waiting for the right moment to drop his bomb. I just had to make sure mine dropped first. The next day, I suggested we have his mother and sister over for dinner that weekend. To celebrate my promotion, I said with a bright smile. We haven't had a proper family dinner in ages. Mark's eyes lit up. I could see the wheels turning in his head. A family dinner. His mother and sister there for support. It was the perfect stage for his drama. He probably imagined himself serving me the papers in front of them, with his family as witnesses to my emotional breakdown. That's a great idea, he said, his enthusiasm a little too quick. I'll call them. They'd love that. Of course they would. They wouldn't miss this for the world. The date was set for Saturday night. 2 more days. 2 more days of playing house with the man who was actively trying to ruin my life. It was the longest 48 hours of my existence. I moved through my days in a fog of controlled rage, every smile a lie, every kind word a strategic move. I felt like a spy in my own home, gathering intel, waiting for the moment to strike. Mark was smug. He walked around a house with a newfound confidence, a little swagger in his step. He thought he was days away from winning the jackpot. He had no idea the game was already over, and he had lost before it had even begun. He would occasionally look at me with an expression of pity, which was almost comical. He pitted me for being so clueless, so trusting. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. On Saturday morning, I got a text from Jessica. It's done. Our petition has been filed and accepted by the court. The motions are in place. The server has his instructions. All assets are frozen as of 9:05 a.m. and this morning. He just doesn't know it yet. Have a lovely dinner. A wave of relief and vindication washed over me. The safety net was in place. Now all I had to do was play my final scene. I spent the day cooking. I made all of Mark's favorite dishes. Roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds. I even baked a chocolate cake from scratch. The domesticity of it felt like a final, bitter joke. Eleanor and Chloe arrived at 7, all smiles and fake pleasantries. Welcome home, Eleanor said, giving me an air kiss that didn't land anywhere near my cheek. We were so thrilled to hear about your promotion. You must be so proud. I am, I said, my smile feeling brittle. It was a lot of hard work. Yes, well, hard work pays off, Chloe added, looking around the dining room with a proprietary air. This house is just lovely. You've done a wonderful job with it. The subtext was so loud it was practically screaming. You've done a wonderful job getting it ready for us. Dinner was excruciating. They talked and laughed, making inside jokes and reminiscing about family vacations I wasn't a part of. I was an audience to their performance, a silent observer in my own dining room. Mark was at the head of the table, holding court, basking in the adoration of his mother and sister. They kept shooting him proud, conspiratorial glances, as if they were all sharing a delicious secret. And they were. They just didn't know I was in on it too. I played my part. I smiled. I nodded. I asked questions. I refilled their wine glasses. I was the perfect hostess, the perfect wife, the perfect fool. As I cleared the dinner plates, Mark tapped his glass with a fork, a self-important gesture he had picked up from his father. Actually, before we have dessert, he began, his voice taking on a serious, somber tone. There's something I need to discuss. Something that affects all of us. This is it, I thought. He's about to do it. Eleanor and Chloe immediately adopted expressions of grave concern, their eyes wide with fake sympathy. They were terrible actors. I've been doing a lot of thinking while you were away, he said, looking at me with a pained expression that was so false it was insulting. About us. About our future. I met his gaze, keeping my own expression neutral. Okay, I said quietly. This is hard for me to say, he continued, laying it on thick. But I don't think I can do this anymore. I'm not happy. I haven't been for a long time. I see, I said, my voice steady. Inside, my heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a wild, exhilarating sense of anticipation. The trap was about to be sprung. It's not your fault, he said, the classic, cowardly line. It's me. Our priorities are just different. You have your career, your ambition.
And I
want something else. Something more. Eleanor reached out and patted his hand. It's okay, sweetie.
You're being brave. Brave.
The word was so ludicrous I almost laughed. So, Mark said, taking a deep breath for dramatic effect. I've filed for divorce. He said the words as if he were delivering a fatal blow. He expected tears. He expected shouting. He expected a scene. I gave him none of it. I simply looked at him, a small, knowing smile touching my lips. I know, I said. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's jaw dropped. Eleanor and Chloe exchanged panicked glances. Their carefully constructed script had just gone up in flames. What? Mark stammered, his composure shattering. What do you mean, you know? I know you filed for divorce, I repeated, my voice calm and clear. I also know that you met with a lawyer before I even left for my trip. And I know about the party you threw for yourself on Tuesday night to celebrate your new beginning. The banner was a nice touch. The color drained from his face. He looked at his mother, then his sister, his eyes wide with disbelief. They looked just as stunned.
How?
How could you possibly know that? He whispered. You're not as clever as you think you are, Mark, I said, leaning forward slightly. And you're sloppy. Incredibly sloppy. I let my gaze drift to Eleanor and Chloe. All three of you are. This is ridiculous, Eleanor sputtered, finding her voice. You're making things up. You're hysterical.
Am I?
I asked, my voice dangerously soft. Am I making up the emails? The ones with the subject line, the plan? The ones where you coached Mark on how to play the victim? Where you called me a social climber and mocked my career? Where you planned how you were going to redecorate my office as soon as I was out of the picture? Their faces were a picture of pure horror. They knew I had them. And Mark, I said, turning my full attention back to my husband. Am I making up the bank transfer? The $150,000 you moved out of our joint savings account the day after I left? My bonus. The money you were planning to use to fund your new life of leisure. Mark was speechless. He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. You see, I had a little surprise of my own, I continued, savoring the moment. My conference ended early. I came home on Tuesday night. I was standing right outside that window, listening to you all toast to my demise. So I got a hotel, and I did some research, and then I hired a lawyer, a very, very good lawyer. I stood up from the table. I have copies of everything. The emails, the bank statements, the security footage of your mother and sister helping you pack up my belongings like vultures. My lawyer, Ms. Davis, finds it all very interesting. She's particularly fascinated by the clear, documented intent to commit fraud. You can't prove anything, Chloe shrieked, her voice shrill with panic. Oh, I can, I said with a serene smile. And I have. You see, while you were all waiting for the right moment to serve me, I was busy taking action. I filed for divorce yesterday morning. My petition was accepted by the court at 9:05 a.m. It includes an emergency motion to freeze every single one of our assets. Your new bank account, Mark, is already frozen.
So are all our joint accounts.
And my petition also includes a request for exclusive possession of this house, given your fraudulent and malicious behavior. I let that sink in. The three of them looked as if they had been turned to stone. So, yes, Mark, you're getting the divorce you wanted, I said, my voice ringing with finality. But you will not get this house. You will not get my money. You will not get to paint me as the villain. You will get a forensic accountant going through every aspect of your life. And you will get to explain to a judge why you felt entitled to steal from your wife.
Just then the doorbell rang.
Mark, Eleanor, and Chloe all jumped, their eyes wide with fear. I'll get it, I said sweetly. I walked to the front door and opened it. A man in a plain jacket stood on the porch. Mark, he asked. I nodded and pointed towards the dining room. The man walked past me, holding a set of documents. I turned back to the dining room, a bright, triumphant smile on my face. I believe that's for you, Mark. It seems the ink is dry, after all. He took the papers from the process server with a trembling hand, his face the color of ash. Eleanor started to sob, a theatrical, gulping sound that held no real sorrow, only the terror of being caught. Chloe just stared at her hands, her smugness completely evaporated, replaced by a sullen, childish pout. I looked at the three of them, their perfect plan in ruins, their triumphant celebration turned to ash in their mouths. They had wanted to humiliate me, to break me, to leave me with nothing. Instead, I had taken everything from them in a single, perfectly executed evening. I believe you were just leaving, I said, my voice as cold as ice. I'd like you all out of my house.
Now.
Eleanor glared at me through her fake tears. You will regret this, she spat. No, I said, looking her directly in the eye. You will. You raised a thief and a coward, and now you get to deal with the consequences. He's your problem now. They scrambled to gather their things, not even looking at each other. Mark wouldn't meet my eyes. He was a shell of the confident man who had been holding court just 30 minutes earlier. He looked small and weak and pathetic. As they shuffled out the door, Chloe turned back to me, her face contorted with impotent rage. You think you're so smart. Smarter than you, I replied without missing a beat. And then I closed the door on their shocked faces, the solid click of the lock the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The silence in the house was profound. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, the adrenaline slowly beginning to recede, leaving a strange sense of calm in its wake. I walked back into the dining room. The remnants of our last supper were still on the table. The half-eaten roast chicken, the wine glasses, the chocolate cake I had so carefully baked. It looked like a crime scene. I gathered up the plates, scraped the food into the trash, and loaded everything into the dishwasher. I was cleansing my house, washing away the last traces of them. The legal battle was, as Jessica had predicted, short and brutal. For them, at least. The evidence was so overwhelming that Mark had no ground to stand on. His lawyer, Mr. Chin, quickly realized they were outmatched and advised Mark to settle. The emails alone were enough to destroy any claim he had to being the wronged party. Jessica was relentless. We deposed Eleanor's financial advisor friend, who, under threat of being reported for professional misconduct and conspiracy to defraud, crumbled completely. He provided a sworn affidavit detailing how Eleanor and Mark had approached him for advice on how to structure the asset transfer to minimize my claim in the divorce. His testimony was the final nail in their coffin. In the end, Mark walked away with almost nothing. The judge ordered him to return the full $150,000 he had stolen, and he was also made to pay for my legal fees, which were substantial. By the time it was all over, his share of our remaining joint assets was laughably small. He had gambled everything on his mother's terrible advice and his own greed, and he had lost spectacularly. He was forced to move out of the house immediately and went to live with Eleanor. I heard through the grapevine that their relationship soured quickly. It turned out that living with a grown man with no job and no money was not as appealing as plotting his glorious, imaginary future. Chloe, too, faced consequences. Her smug satisfaction turned into bitter resentment. She had been counting on her brother's newfound wealth to fund her lifestyle. That dream was dead. I sold the house. I couldn't stand to live there anymore, with the memories of their laughter echoing in the dining room. The real estate market was strong, and I made a significant profit. The money, combined with my own savings that I had protected, gave me a new beginning they could only dream of. I bought a beautiful apartment in the city, with a stunning view and a home office that was all mine, painted in a vibrant, joyful blue. A few months after the divorce was finalized, Mark called me. It was a number I didn't recognize, so I answered. His voice was hesitant, stripped of all its former arrogance.
"It's me," he said.
"I know," I replied, my voice cool. "What do you want, Mark?" I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I messed up. I know that. It was my mom and Chloe. They got in my head. They twisted everything." The pathetic attempt to shift the blame was so predictable, it was almost boring. "No, Mark," I said, my voice hard and clear. "They didn't make you do anything. They gave you an opportunity to show your true character, and you did. You're weak. You let them poison you because it was easier than being a real partner. You saw a shortcut to a life you didn't want to work for, and you took it. That's not on them. That's all on you." There was a long silence. I could hear his shallow breathing on the other end of the line. I miss you," he said, his voice cracking. I laughed. It was a short, sharp, humorless sound. "No, you don't. You miss my paycheck. You miss the comfortable life I provided. You don't miss me. You never even knew me." "That's not true," he protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I countered. "You thought I was a fool who would come home and fall apart. You thought I would be easy to manipulate. You underestimated me at every turn. That's not what love looks like, Mark. That's contempt." I didn't wait for a reply. I had said everything I needed to say. "Goodbye, Mark," I said, and I hung up the phone. Then I blocked his number. Life moved on. My new job was even better than I had hoped. I was respected, valued, and my career soared. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and built a life for myself that was entirely my own, on my own terms. I was happier than I had been in years, free from the subtle, constant weight of his family's disapproval and his own weak-willed placations. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about that evening, standing outside my own home, the sound of their laughter drifting through the window, a reminder of my own strength, a reminder that betrayal can sometimes be a gift, a painful, brutal gift that clears the path for something better. They tried to burn my life to the ground, but they forgot that I was the one who built it. I could build it again, stronger and more beautiful than before. He wanted his freedom, and he had paraded it around like a prize he had won. But in the end, I was the one who was truly free. Free from his lies, his weakness, and the toxic family that had enabled him. He was trapped in the wreckage of the life he had destroyed, while I was out building a new one. The best revenge, I discovered, wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and complete. It was a happy life, well lived without him. They had wanted to see me fall. Instead, they got to watch me fly.